Okay, so this is part two. Part one, we essentially did, when was it? Like last month or some time ago? So we're gonna, it was too much for 1 hour, so we turned it into two parts. So hopefully you got a chance to download the handout. It's essentially the same spot. I put all my handouts in the, in a shared folder. So if you could get it. So last time we talked about color type graphics, and today we're going to finish it up by talking about like opening statement, closing statement, better practices, and also how to do better Q&A, right? And should absolutely not use me as an example of what a good presentation looks like. So again, these are from those books that I showed you last time, some of the recommendations from these experts. So the primary author has a PhD in economics. So some of the examples I show you, it's not necessarily clinical examples, but rather like, what you might see in any presentation. So these are the books that I mentioned to you. So mostly the one to the left by Jonathan Schwabish. Did anyone look him up on YouTube? That he has like a bunch of presentations and like pretty good. I mean, who has free time? But later in life, you'll have some free time, hopefully. Okay, so opening statements, right? How do you guys open your presentations? And I definitely did not do an opening statement today.
Introduce yourself.
Okay, introduce yourself. What else? What are you gonna present? What else? What is it?
Learning objectives.
Okay, learning objectives. What else?
It depends on what we're talking about.
Sure. Okay, so here's what usually looks like, right? Introduction, and then now let's say in general, like we're probably interested in presenting your research, right? Let's say what's the conference that you're gonna present your research at? Western States, right? So probably you're going to have introduction, some background like previous literature, your data, methods, results, conclusion, right? So they're saying this is very boring, and this is what most people do. Because, well, unless you're really interested in the research, if you listen to somebody's research, it's going to be very boring, right? So they're saying you need to have an alternative view of how you present your research. And this could be like, doesn't necessarily have to be research. If you're doing a continuing education, right? Similar situation. So you want to start with a hook and a preview. So you want to say something dramatic to grab the people's attention. Okay. So you see, like, so it's instead of that pyramid, it's kind of like a flipped double-sided, because at the beginning, at the end are very important. So at the beginning, you want to have a hook, and then in the middle, you put all the boring stuff, your methods, and all the details, right? And then at the end, you want to be dramatic, your conclusion, your takeaway. And I'm going to tell you exactly why the beginning and end are very important, because most people are going to remember the beginning and the end, and nobody's going to remember, well, I shouldn't say nobody. In general, people are less likely to remember the middle, more likely to remember the beginning and the end. And especially, I want to emphasize the beginning, because we base the beginning usually on, introduction, how's everyone doing, but not, instead of having a punchline. You need to start with your punchline, hook, whatever you want to call it, right? So these are some recommendations for your opening statement. So they say, avoid saying something generic like, thank you for having me, maybe you believe this too, or I am glad to be here, right? You want to start with your hook. Open with the hook and state your major takeaway. You can actually give them the conclusion. And I almost never see this, unless like it's like very experienced speakers at conferences, right? Like, actually start with your key takeaway. Like, by the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you why, natural furantoin is the best treatment for cystitis, and you should avoid using fosfomycin, right? I actually told you what you're going to take away. So, instead of today, I'm going to talk about treatments of cystitis, okay? You didn't give the takeaway. And you can do different things to make it like more dramatic if you want. And then the third point they make is take advantage of prime recency effect. Have you guys heard of prime recency effect? It sounds familiar to you, prime?
I've heard of the term, I don't know what it
Yeah,
means.
okay. Prime recency, or some, I think the research actually called it primacy recency effect. And here's what they did. So this is from the 60s, by the way, nothing new. So they essentially had this is from psychology literature. So they had actually students enrolled in a study, and they said, we're going to show you a bunch of words, and then we're going to see how much you remember. And then they said they did it in sequence, like the words that came at the beginning, the words that came in the middle, and the words that came at the end. And essentially, they found that people remember the beginning and the end, and then less likely to remember in the middle. And this is essentially established in the field of memory. So any memory experts that talk to you about memory, they usually tell you the beginning and the end is important. And essentially, and the other thing that they mention is like, so also keep in mind, so if people remember the beginning, it's usually more related to the long-term memory. And if they remember the last thing you said, it's more of a short-term memory. That's still in their short-term memory, right? So you don't want to just have some stuff in the beginning and some stuff. So you want to have the same stuff at the beginning, at the end, which is essentially your conclusion. So, and there's not a bunch of conclusions you can have. So like if it's your CE, your number 1 or 2 best key takeaways, you want to start with that and end with that, so you make sure that the audience will remember it. Otherwise, nobody's going to remember, right? So they'll do the post. 2 months later, you go talk to people who attended your CE. They're probably not going to remember what the key takeaway was. So there are things you can do. And so this is the picture they have. So on the x-axis, they're looking at primacy, so at the beginning, and then intermediate, and then recency at the end. And then on the y-axis, percentage of words that people will remember. So you see much higher at the beginning and at the end. Okay. So you should take, and that's why this looks like this. So you see the hook and the conclusion. You should spend most of your effort and energy of having really good punchlines, because that's what people are more likely to remember, the beginning and at the end. And the beginning, nobody's gonna remember what statistical software you used or what methodology. I mean, some people do, right? But that's probably not what you want people to take away. Okay, so I'll let you read this. So these are a couple of examples. So this is one example. And again, this is an economist writing, so it's not. So I'll let you read this. Hello. How do you guys like this opening statement? No? So here's an alternative. Catchy, right? So actually, so it's an opening statement. You tell them what you're going to talk about, but also gives out like the conclusion or whatever you want the audience. So take advantage of that. You can actually put your conclusions at your opening statement, so people can remember. Now, closing statement. How do you guys close your presentations? Thank you. What question do you guys have? Right? So, that shouldn't, okay, so closing statement, if you remember prime recency, right? So you say your closing statement, then if there is Q&A, that means technically that was not your recency, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show you at the, later on. It's a good idea if you had like extensive Q&A to also close it with your takeaway. Okay, so you say, okay, I'm going to answer the last question, and then you answer the question and say, okay, hopefully you state your takeaway. That way people didn't forget. Okay, so here are some recommendations for closing statements. So avoid closing with the details and caveats of your work, right? So the presentation was the time to talk about a lot of the limitations, all the details. By the time you get to your closing, we don't have time for that, right? So just get to the punchline. Next, they say focus once more on your headline and highlight the important message you want everyone to take away from your presentations, like I said. Memorizing the opening and closing statements can be useful. Now, in general, I think we don't think about memorizing opening and closing statement because it's usually opening is like introduction and then closing is like thank you. And what question do you have? So we hardly think of memorizing. But if you have carefully written a statement that you're gonna have a punchline in it and make sure that you move people, you touch people, tap into emotions. I mean, it depends on your topic, but sometimes you can tap into emotions, right? So if you do have something like that, which you should, it's a good idea to memorize it. So here are a couple of examples. So I'll let you read this example of closing statement. How do you guys like this? Good? Here's a better version. Better? So a little more dramatic, right? So you can put like numbers. Like usually the way we use numbers is like, oh, at the beginning I'm going to have some epidemiology slide. Here's the prevalence of whatever, right? Instead of having a slide on prevalence, you can put it in your punchline. Imagine you are one of the, 60 million people suffering from cancer, or instead of at the beginning you have like prevalence. You can put it in your punchline to like you could be one of the 60 million dying from, whatever your presentation was. So you can make it a little more dramatic, and of course you tie your takeaway in there, so it sticks better. Okay, so that's all they had on opening. I mean, there's not much you can do with opening and closing. And then at the end, you'll have hopefully time for Q&A, and you should always have time for Q&A. If you ran too long. And that's why when we talked about like learning objective, I said like usually you shouldn't have too many learning objectives. Like 5 learning objectives for one CER is too much, right? You're not going to have enough time for your Q&A. So you want to make sure there's plenty of time. So give compliments first. So how do you give compliments during Q&A? Yeah, great question, right? I was thinking, that's a question that I have considered. That's I've been thinking about it. Like you can do so, because it's easy to jump into like you're thinking like, oh my God, what am I gonna give as an answer, right? But also if you have practiced this also gives you more time to think about formulating your answer. So you buy yourself some time, So give compliments first, and also it puts them at ease too. So they may be less aggressive with their follow-up questions. I don't know. It depends on the setting. Okay, repeat or paraphrase the question, and I'm pretty bad at this. It's always good to repeat your question, especially if it's a big room and you have a microphone. You ask me a question, the person in the back didn't hear, and you just give the answer, and then the person has to kind of guess what the question was, right? Especially like your CEs are online, right? So, your CEs are different because you just have to read the question. But in a live audience, it's good to repeat the question or even paraphrase. Also, sometimes if you're not sure what you can paraphrase it. Like, I want to make sure I understood the question correctly, and you paraphrase it and say, "Is that what you're asking?" That also helps you to make sure, because what you don't want is you give a long answer and they say that's not what I was asking, right? Because because, and not necessarily your fault, because sometimes people are not very good at asking questions, so their questions may not be clear. So, it's good to repeat or paraphrase. Ask open-ended questions. So, close-ended question like other questions. Open-ended is what question do you guys have, right? So anytime you ask questions back, make sure it's open-ended. When the Q&A session comes to an end, this is what I was trying to tell earlier. Take the opportunity to restate your closing statement so that your audience lives with that in their heads, right? So prime recency idea. So because Q&A, sometimes if you finish early, right, your Q&A might be 15 minutes, right? So that actually makes it much longer from your conclusion. So you have a good opportunity to restate your conclusion at the end of the Q&A just to make sure. Okay, so opening statement, closing statement, Q&A, and now in general, these are some recommendations they had for presentation in general. So throughout the presentation, so the first one is you probably don't want to memorize your presentation. Now, opening and closing is fine, right? You don't memorize your entire, don't write a script and memorize it. And I know some people do that. And some people can do that, right? It's risky because if whatever happens and you forget one line, it can throw you off your entire presentation. So in general, it's not a good idea. And also, it doesn't sound natural. You're trying. It's good to talk to your audience, right? And that's why I say, you don't want to do what I did here where I have full sentences, right? You want bullet points, don't have full sentences. I put full sentences here so you have a record of all these recommendations from the book. The second is practice can help you detect any distracting patterns in your speech. So practice, different ways to practice. You can practice with a friend, with a mentor, in front of the mirror. You can record yourself. This is actually pretty, and it doesn't necessarily have to have your video. You can literally record your voice because not only you see how long it took you, but you can also listen and catch distractors like like, people say, like, there's a lot of fillers. People say, a lot. So it's best to minimize those. I'm not going to say you have to absolutely eliminate it. A couple of these in occasion is fine. And in fact, psychology research says these are actually good for your brain. So anytime you say it actually helps your brain being like thinking and being creative, but it's very bad for the audience. So the audience doesn't want that, and that's why people say don't minimize your fillers with just because the audience doesn't like it, but it's actually good for your brain. You can practice. Like I said, you can record yourself. You might discover things that you say that you're not aware of. And have you guys listened to yourself? Sometimes you discover like I discovered that I used to do that, make the sound of, because I record a lot of videos. I was like, oh my God, I do that a lot. So I wouldn't have known unless I listened to myself. So I do that a lot less now. So that's helpful. Project to the person in the back of the room, especially if someone in the front is asking you a question, project to the person in the back of the room to make sure that everybody can hear you. Now, usually when you have a microphone, it's not an issue, but right now, it's a small group, so it's not an issue. But if I was in a classroom, I would have to shout at the person in the back. That's also useful. So if someone in the front is asking you a question, it's a good idea to walk away from them, because the natural tendency is to walk towards them. Like, you ask me a question, I come to you like, oh, and then this becomes because I'm not going to shout to your face. So actually my volume will go down as the closer I come to you. So if somebody in the front is asking a question, I usually try to step back, go as far. That way she has to shout now because I'm getting further from her. And then now I have to shout back so the person in the back can hear. Okay, next they had slowing your rate. So this happens to all of us. We speak like really fast. because primarily because you know the stuff so well and you have practice and you're so over it, right? Because you have said it so much, like, oh God, I have to go. Like, you want to get through it as quickly as possible. You're worried that you may run out of time, so you say things very fast, and this is very bad for the audience. So actually slow down. So, you know, of course, practice will help you slow down. You can also make intentional pauses. You know, you can actually build that into it. Let's see, what else did I have here? Pauses. So pauses are a natural part of our everyday speech and give your audience a moment to absorb what you've said, right? So you know the stuff so well. So when you're, you know, going so quickly, people may be lost in the audience. And also it depends, you know, you're presenting your oncology to a bunch of oncologists, sure, they're not going to be lost, you know. You speak to students will definitely be lost. Or if you're doing a CE, not everybody is expert on the topic in the room, so people have come to learn something. So you do want to take your time. The silence can be powerful, building tension and anticipation as your audience waits for you to make a point or reach a conclusion. And I'm pretty bad at this. I have not used pauses that much. You know, you can say, and so, you know, imagine you're about to show the results of your study. So you talked about your methods and you say, so we did all of this, and after looking at 60,000 patients over the last 5 years, what we found was, you know, you just you know, just a fraction of a second of a pause, you know, people are like, oh my God, what did you find? Now, assuming that wasn't on your screen, so it was, you know, it's more difficult. So you can animate things, so then you animate it. And also when you animate it, it takes time for the animation that actually could be your pause as you're waiting for the, you know, for the number to fly into your slide. Because in general, like, people avoid the animation because it actually is an unnecessary pause, right? So I actually minimize animations in general because there's too many pauses, you know, but you can be intentional to bring a dramatic effect. Prepare to speak for 80% of your allotted time so you can take questions and adapt if things are running late, right? So 80%, that's assuming you speak slowly, right? So don't go faster. Okay, number 9 was always orient the audience to your charts. Do you guys do this? When how do you orient people to your chart? What is it?
Like a laser pointer?
I'm looking for more than that.
So, like, I'll explain, like, what the relationship, like, what are we looking at, what are on the axes, what are
Oh, hold on. Yes, let's practice. Who wants to volunteer to present this graph? Sorry, because
No?
you are absolutely correct.
I'll start.
Who does ID? You're the ID guy.
Apparently.
Okay. What do you see on? Do you have any questions about it before I put you on the spot? Why don't you practice for a minute so you can present this? We're just trying to show what's concentration dependent. We have tobramycin, ciprofloxacin, tacrolimus. If you haven't heard of that, just consider that the beta-lactam. Okay, go for it.
So over here we have a figure that plots the colony forming units over a period of time after initiation of 3 different antibiotics, tobramycin, ciprofloxacin, tacrolimus. Each antibiotic we've plotted the colony forming units for isolates with different MICs. That's the part that was throwing me off, like what that MIC
Okay.
is, but I'm guessing, I want to say it's like,
24 times the MIC,
duh,
16
yeah,
times the
Yeah, it's their fault for that, but they shouldn't have said MIC, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay, so at different concentrations of the antibiotic,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense why there's a control. different concentrations of antibiotics plotted over time. So time 0 would be the initiation of antibiotics, and then plotting the growth of bacteria.
Okay, that's very good. Good? You guys like that? Excellent. Okay, so in general, you, like Dr. Sierra was saying, you want to say what's on the axis. Okay, so here in this picture, I'm showing you 3 antibiotics, tobramycin, ciprofloxacin, ticarcillin, beta-lactam. On the x-axis, or you can say in the horizontal axis, we are looking at time in units time. On the y-axis, or you can say on the vertical axis, we are looking at how much bacteria is growing measured in colony forming units. Okay, so you just oriented to the axis. Okay. Now we have 3 panels, so you can say in all of these we have a control where we don't have any antibiotics. That's the red line. So as you can see, as time goes on, the number of colonies will grow because there are no in all of these 3 panels. Now in each panel, we're showing you what happens when we have antibiotics and we increase the concentration. So as the color gets darker, we are increasing the concentration. So with tobramycin, you can see that as the concentration increases, the drop in colonies is much significantly higher. The same is true with ciprofloxacin. As we increase the concentration, the colonies drop very quickly as time goes on. Now with ticarcillin, we can see that although initially some increase in concentration makes a difference, at some point it doesn't matter how much you increase the concentration. So what it tells you is that the first 2 are concentration dependent, whereas the third one is concentration independent. But anyway, the point is you orient to the axis, like Dr. Sierra was saying. Here's another one. So this is about, who wants to volunteer on this one? This is adverse effects. This one is easy. Adverse effects of vaccines. Have you guys seen charts like this? How often do you see vaccine? And this is in the Lancet. Infectious disease, Lancet Infectious Disease. This is not a random journal. So they have chosen this type of chart. So, and I'm using this as an example because if you're shocked to see this right now, your audience is definitely unfamiliar with this. So, which brings the point of orienting the patient, not the patient, the audience to your charts. So, okay, so because we don't have axis here, now you're dealing with angle, right? So you can say, okay, so here I'm showing you the adverse effects of the vaccines, the 2 vaccines. So a full dose of Pfizer's vaccine and a half dose of Moderna's vaccine. So red is the full dose of, where did the laser go? Oh, it doesn't do on TV. That's what it is, okay. Sorry, the TV is immune to laser. Did you know this? I didn't know this. You see, it works on wall, but not on TV screen.
No. Is it just, I mean, I guess it's just.
But anyway, that's not the point. Okay, so I just defined red and blue, the 2 different vaccines. So we are looking around the circle, we have put different adverse effects. And from the center of the circle, measuring out is what percentage of each adverse effect occurred in each. So you can see, for example, pain. Sorry, I have to point now. Pain. So the further you go away from the center of the circle, that means the higher. So and then so you know this is 0%, 10% radius, and 25% radius. But anyway, you just orient the audience to what they're actually, instead of this is on the screen and I'm telling you, obviously there is more pain with the full dose of Pfizer than the half dose. You know, it's obvious to you because you spend time looking at it at home, but you should orient your audience to what they're looking at. But anyway, don't worry about it. I tried to find a ridiculous figure, and I had one ready to go. Okay. Now, Dr. Sia, sorry, I cut you off earlier. So, was there another thing on your list that we didn't let you? So we talked about the axes and what each panel is, point to the panel. Yeah.
I mean, and just making sure and you did it, but just making sure the emphasis is on the applications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Next we have stay in the center of the room or just off to the side of the screen instead of behind the podium. So, it depends on your setting. So it's usually good not to, and I know sometimes when you're nervous, this is like a safe space behind the podium, right? People cannot see you if you're shaking, if you, but in general, it's, you can have a better conversation if you come around and be closer so you're not hiding, and they can see your body language much better, Another option is to simply stand next to it. So sometimes, so I have a clicker now. If I had to constantly hit next on here, right? So I can be close by, so I can easily hit the button on the keyboard so I can go next. Don't apologize. Have you participated presentation and like let's say it's not advancing, people say, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I apologize, right? It's not your fault. Like, don't apologize, and nobody is gonna write in your evaluation, oh my God, remember when your slide was not advancing, you forgot to apologize. It's unnecessary, and when you apologize, it just brings more attention to it. So just work on it and just move on. No need to apologize. Maintain good posture. So that's self-explanatory. Smile and look, so it actually makes a difference. So if you're like, I mean, it's difficult for me to emulate that, but because you may be tired, you woke up at 4 a.m., you went 2 rounds, and then your CE was at 2 p.m. You're out of energy. You may have had, I don't know, a lot of stuff going on. The attending was so rude today. So many things. So they could have drained your energy. There's nothing left. So it's easy to look uninterested in your topic. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you smile and sound like you're interested. And I'll show you some techniques later with what you can do with your body. Use small natural gestures. Walk if there is a space. Don't walk too much. I know if you walking too much is. It's okay to occasionally, walk so you can address, especially if you have a big, you don't just want to stand in one spot because the rest of the audience feels neglected, right? So occasionally it's okay to walk around, but also don't walk too much, because I have also found that there's like 50-50 on this. Some people, so this is what I learned in residency. Every time I did presentations and feedback came in. I don't think you guys get feedback on your CEs, but if you, right? There's no feedback from the audience coming in. Right?
There is. I just don't know if they receive it.
Oh, I see. Did you receive feedback? You
Yeah.
did? Okay.
It's a little, like spreadsheet. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your CE was virtual anyway. But anyway, I remember, so I walked a little bit during my CE back in residency. So half of the people loved it, and half of it absolutely hated it. So, and it was a good, probably like 30 or 40 people in attendance. So it was not a small sample. But anyway, so I say try not to walk too much, but a little bit is okay. Uh-oh, did the battery die? Okay, the battery died on this, so I'm manually operating. Dress well. When in doubt, opt for more formal dress over more casual. Maintain eye contact, so that's why I mentioned, you want to speak to the audience, don't just memorize the script. And, when you're having a conversation with people, you can have excellent eye contact. Next, know your limits. What does that mean to you?
How much you can fit in your time.
Say that again.
Know like how much you can fit and hear a lot of.
Sure, sure. Don't put too much in your side. What else?
Some people don't understand.
For sure, don't put anything you don't understand. But here's some of the other stuff that they were also meaning here. If you're not funny, don't tell a joke. Right? Because that could backfire. Or if you're not good at telling stories, don't tell a story in the middle of, that's what I mean. Know your limits. So if you know you're very funny and you want to put a little humor in there, that's absolutely fine. But what you don't want is, if it's not your thing, don't go there. So that's what I mean. Know your limits. Now, don't turn your back to the audience. So like, if I come and here, I'm showing you, now I have your back. I have my back to you, right? So in general, don't have your back to the audience. So when you walk, just still face the audience as you're walking, And I think I have a video on this. How much time do we have? Okay, I'll come back to, remind me to come back to the video. I want to make sure we don't run out of time. Sorry. Okay, we'll come back to that video if there's time. Use powerful poses. Have you guys heard of power poses? Yeah, so this was Amy, you guys know Amy Cuddy? Had a famous TED Talk. You can watch the TED Talk later, but talks about what you can do with your body. So she's a psychologist, and I forget which school she's teaching at. Essentially did a lot of research to this type of research. So it has to do with what you can do with your body in order to change cortisol levels in the body. So essentially got blood levels to see what the cortisol is before and after some interventions with the body, and she came up with the power poses. So these are the powerless and powerful poses. So powerless poses on the left. Essentially, so this has to do with evolutionary psychology. So essentially, throughout evolution, where we were followed by tigers, and well, I don't know if you guys know this. So if we'll use tiger as an example. When a tiger catches something, what part of body do they eat first? No. That's how they kill it, but they don't eat it, huh?
Oh, no, you said. Is that what you said?
It's the internal organs. That's the most nutritious. It's not the muscle, it's not the steak. It's the organs. It's the liver, the intestines. They eat all the organs first, because if they have to flee the scene and they left all the steak, they got all the nutritious stuff. So pretty much lions, tigers, they're all on the same page. They eat the organs first. If there is room, they'll finish the muscles, whatnot. But anyway, I say this because, so if you are trying to survive, the nature wants you to protect your internal organs, okay? So when you're in a stressful situation, your body language goes around protecting your intestines, okay? So these are powerless poses on the left. So you see these are usually, protecting the intestines. And what Amy found is that when you do this, even though a tiger is not coming after you, your body thinks you're trying to protect yourself, so actually cortisol levels go up. And she has measured it. She got blood levels, so she's not making this up. The opposite is when you have powerful poses. So the big example is chest out, right? You have your chest out. Your body knows, oh my God, you feel so safe. There is absolutely no need for cortisol levels to go up. So you can the Supergirl, no, what's it called? Superwoman, Wonder. But you see, like the hands on the hip, so you can do it. Now, don't do this in the middle of your presentation. So the technique is right before your presentation, you go to the bathroom and you practice some of these, or before a job interview, whatever is about to make you, nervous or stressful, you go and do these power poses to the right, and it actually helps lower your cortisol levels, and it helps you, okay? And Now, this has nothing to do with politics, but I'm just trying to show you what some of the, so this is some of the power poses by some of the former leaders. Yeah, you can come and sit.
Huh?
You can sit if you want. We're just doing a workshop.
Sorry.
Okay, so I think that was the last one. So we have time to go back. So essentially, that was Angela Merkel was doing the number 3 pose. So those are power poses. Now I don't know if that was intentional or that's what. But when I saw that picture, I was like, "Ooh, that's one of the power poses. I'm going to use it in my slide." Okay, so okay, that was it. What question do you guys have, and what did we miss, Dr. Sierra?
I think it's a little bit difficult to implement some of these during your CE presentation, but there's definitely good resources about like your volume, your pitch, your tone, which we didn't talk about at time. Did you talk about last time?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, then I missed that one. I'm sorry, but like that's I think.
No, I mean last year, not the part 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant part 1.
Yeah.
I think it's something to think about when you're giving a presentation. When I've done virtual presentations, I don't know about you, but I will use some of these physical tactics, like how you stand or how you move, even if the audience can't see you, because it does, for me at least, kind of shift my mindset when I'm presenting. Because if I'm just like slumped over here in a corner, like trying to present, and for me, sitting when I present is very difficult. Like I much prefer to stand. So like you have some flexibility in the room that you'll be in. Think about how that works best for you, even if the audience can't see you. Your tone will reflect a lot. So, something else to think about for CE. This is good for COS. Since you most of you will be facilitating in COS.
Okay. Western Conference is in person, right?
Western States is in person. It's just the
State,
CE
yeah,
that's not.
yeah.
But it is live.
Yeah.
It's just not. But yeah, Western States is definitely in person. And it's super fun. It's fun. We all look sad about it, but it is fun.
What question do you guys have? Nothing? Okay, well, hopefully this was helpful. And good luck. See you guys next time. I don't know, do we have more this year or this was the last of?
It's the last one this year.
Then we'll see you in January.
I don't think there's any more. Yeah, this calendar.